Welcome to the Develop Leadership Podcast, where we seek to explore the art and the science of developing your leadership capacity. Every month, we want to raise thought-provoking ideas and equip you to be an investor of the influence you carry. If you're ready to journey with us, then it's time to develop.
Hey, welcome back, my fellow learners and leaders. This is Tony Villafane coming at you with another episode of the Develop Leadership Podcast. Well, today we are continuing our 5-episode conversation on the 5 marks of a healthy leader. As Gateway Church's newly established leadership marks, we want to unpack each one of them in specific detail, uncovering the beauty and the tension of each trait. So far, we have dialogued over the traits of following first and serve always. And in this episode, we'll delve into the third quality of cultivate clarity. Here's a description of this quality. Healthy leaders cultivate clarity in all things, giving their team a shared understanding of the organization's mission, values, and objectives. In providing clarity, they empower their team to make confident decisions. They provide space for teammates to calibrate through troubleshooting and collaborate within their strengths. They encourage team members to think outside the box, but to do so competently. They follow modeling clarity by practicing vulnerability in sharing their own thoughts, ideas, and dreams. Healthy leaders share in the cultivation of clarity by giving space for their team to take ownership while keeping them accountable. They give space for mistakes to be made and to be learned from. They believe that team moves greater unity and synergy when the culture is carried not just by the leader, but by every member on the team. Clear is kind, and consistency is key in cultivating clarity. So to help unpack the complex intricacies of this trait and mark of cultivate clarity is Joe Caruso. Joe, my dude, thank you so much for being willing to join me today.
Yeah, absolutely, Tony, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Would you be able just to share a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you are, when you are, how you are, whatever comes to mind?
Sure, yeah. I'm the executive campus pastor at a church in Akron, Ohio. And so it's called Grace Church, and I'm in the Charis Fellowship and have known Scott for a really, really long time. And so we've worked together on some global missions projects, and then have been just good friends throughout the years and stuff like that as well. And so it's been fun to hear about what's happening at Gateway, and then also kind of behind the scenes be someone that prays for the church and kind of knows Scott halfway decent, at least as well. Yeah. So that's a lot of fun. I started out as a guy that was all about mobilizing people into the inner city. That's how I got started here at Grace Church. And then that bled into like global mission stuff. And then that bled into kind of overseeing various different ministries throughout the church, everything from first impressions to our communication strategies, to we have a video venue as a part of our campus. And so all these different pieces. And I've always been tasked with like going in and like helping formulate some of those teams, kind of bring some clarity as to what we're trying to accomplish and why we do what we do. And then just in the last year, I've been asked to be the executive campus pastor here. So it's been a lot of fun. I've been married for 18 years, have a little 9-year-old girl. She's absolutely amazing and better than all of your kids. And
okay,
no, I'm just she's the best though. She's really wonderful. And yeah, and then we have a bunny rabbit. So that's our current pet right now.
A bunny rabbit.
His name is Yeah. If my wife really wanted one a couple years ago for her birthday, and its name is Yakko. So if any of you would remember the Animaniacs cartoon from way back when, there was Yakko, Wacko, and Dot. And when we got the bunny, we thought maybe we'll eventually get 2 or 3. Yakko, Wacko, and Dot. Well, we still only have 1, and that's for a reason. So
that's a blast from the past. I would have not. That was way back in my memory banks. That's funny. Okay, so maybe one day you'll get the other 2 rabbits.
One day, we'll see.
We'll see. Well, my dude, thank you for being willing to join in. I love our technological advancements to be able to do this from states away. And and as we begin to unpack this trait of cultivating clarity, let me just ask by beginning, is there any moment for you, a comedic moment, where you tried to cultivate clarity and it just didn't land the way that you intended?
Yeah, absolutely. The craziest example coming to mind actually was a leading up scenario. So as I mentioned, I've overseen our global missions stuff for years, for about 14 years. And I mean, to the point where our senior pastor will straight up ask me, like, what do you think we should do next in this field? So it's been very much a partnership as far as that stuff concerned. Well,
Hmm.
I've also been known at times to default talking at too high of a level, talking at 30,000 foot level. And about 6 or 7 years ago, I was talking with some missionaries, talking with some partners, talking with some new leaders in our church about engaging in a new process. And then I would sit down with our lead pastor and let him know, like, oh, yeah, we're looking at some new options and we've been having some great conversations. We're mobilizing some new teams. And in my mind, I'm like, those are the three things we're doing. Like,
Yep.
here's where we're going. What I accidentally failed to mention to him, though, and he brought this up to me. He's like, hey, I had an interesting conversation in the lobby this weekend with someone that's really excited to go on their missions trip to Thailand. We're going to Thailand? And I was like, yeah, Jeff, we are. And it's a new partnership and we're supporting them as missionaries and like all these different things. And it
Mm-hmm.
just dawned on me that in all of these, like, here are the three things we're doing type of communication I was doing. I totally forgot to mention the fact that, like, brand new partnership, brand new country, brand new missionary relationships. And that was some awkward conversations. And honestly, it messed
Mm-hmm.
with both of our credibility a little bit because he was caught off guard, which made him look like, does he even know what's going on in his own church? And of
Sure.
course, it stressed even a little bit of our working trust a little bit because he's like, I thought I could trust you, and I think I still can, but that was pretty awkward. So, yeah, clarity is pretty important.
Yes. Yes, it is. Absolutely, especially when you're establishing partnerships in other countries.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh man. So give me the 30,000 foot. Why is cultivating clarity a skill, vital skill, in an organization or team?
One of the things that comes to mind is it definitely has to be a skill because you can't like, if you don't have clarity, you're not going to lead well.
Hmm.
I've always appreciated the quote, and it's attributed to a few different people, but that the single biggest mistake in communication is assuming that it already happened. A lot of
Hmm.
times we'll send the text, we'll send the email, we'll have the leadership meeting, we'll have the cup of coffee with someone, and we're like, man, I told you, I explained to you, I laid it out for you in 3 bullet points. Here's exactly what we're doing. And then you get that what can be very frustrating text like, when was that meeting? What were we supposed to do? And you're like, we just talked through that and it's in the email. And that's where all that snarky response comes from, like, per my last email kind of comes from,
Yep.
because we're like, how did you not read what I said? But if we can kind of go into these situations as a leader realizing that almost to a frustrating fault, no matter how much communication we put out there, if we assume it's already handled, um, we're going to be in big trouble.
Hmm.
And so I've also been told and then seen this to really play out that the two biggest and fastest reasons someone was going to leave your team or leave your organization is for a lack of opportunity to grow or for lack of gratitude. And really, the only way to
Oh,
cultivate either of those is through clarity. And so,
yeah.
for instance, like if you have a teammate or a volunteer or someone that's doing a really good job, and you're like, I should thank them. And then we say something like, hey, man, thanks for all you do. Like, you're just the best. Like, that's very different than saying, like, hey, man, thanks for the way that you're always like ready to actually listen to people when they show
Hmm.
up, listen to people when they have questions. Like, you're so good at engaging new people. You are so empathetic. And like, that really makes you an incredible member of our team. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
thanks for
Hmm.
all you do. And then something like that is a game changer because what you're now communicating is like, I know you, I see you, and I value you, as opposed to, you get the birthday card that has the wrong month on it because I'm supposed to send out birthday cards. It's just a big, big deal. And then the
Yeah.
same thing happens with growth. If we're going to help somebody grow in the organization, like, um, showing them clarity helps them know what's expected of them. And it also shows like kind of their ceiling. Like,
Yeah.
this is all that I see possible for you. We had my wife and I were actually leading a small group for the last 5 years, and
Hmm.
we spent 2023 gearing up the group to multiply into three new groups. And so we're recording, what is this, February? last March, so we notified our whole group, hey, we have these three couples that are willing to step into leadership. We're gonna take the whole year though. And that's a whole different story if we want to. We're gonna take the rest of the year, get them ready, get you ready, make very strategic steps, really help you grow into this. And we notified our group's pastor. We got everything moving. Well, they were supposed to start their new groups in January. And one of the couples has said, hey, we just got notified that we can't start our group yet because we didn't fill out an application.
Hmm.
The first thing that went through my mind was, how much of a runway do we need to give a group leader that they're going to start a group to where we couldn't have notified them that they have to fill out an application along the way?
Hmm.
And there was some transition on our team, and I think that's where the ball got dropped. And we owned up to the fact that like we dropped that ball. But what we learned, at least in that segment of our church, was we weren't very clear on what the expectations were for you to go from I'm interested in becoming a group leader to becoming a group leader.
Yeah,
Because that same couple, they would have filled out that application 7 months ago had they realized that was a part of the process, but they didn't.
sure.
And so what it ended up doing is it made us look like red tape champions because you have to do all these steps, and it made them feel deflated, like, what did we mess up? And all along the way, clarity could have really helped nip all of that in the bud.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's fascinating to hear how even when there is a lack of communication, someone could be interpreting that as there's just a bunch of red tape and it's rigid
Absolutely.
and so on and so forth, or the opposite, they just don't care.
Right.
And I'm not feeling valued. And for you to say that there was that's two of the bigger reasons why people might walk away, lack of opportunity, but the lack of gratitude, like that's huge. And I can absolutely see that that is the reason why people would want to step away from a job or an experience or a team, because they're not feeling valued and seen. And so yeah, those are huge, and a reason and a tell to say why cultivating clarity is a vital skill. Now I think that there are obvious tells
Mhm.
to why a team does not have clarity, and one of them is just deer in the headlights. You walk into a room, there's
Absolutely.
like just absolute confusion that is happening. And I know I've walked into a space where I've led and my team is like, I'm so confused. And so clearly there's a moment of a lack of clarity. But for you, what would you say are some other tells outside of the deer in the headlights look that would indicate, okay, maybe there's some lack of clarity that's going on right now?
Yeah, I think mission drift is a big one. Um, why we're doing something may be one of the most important questions we can ask and communicate. And so if we have a a volunteer showing up and suddenly they feel like they have a little bit of downtime, clarity can be the difference between like just hanging out in the corner scrolling through Instagram, or like going and making sure that the lobby is restocked for the next group of people that's coming in, or going and introducing themselves to someone that looks like they don't know what they're doing in the church yet, or like that mission drift. Like, why are you here? It's not to be a warm body, it's not to have somebody behind the desk, it's not to just make sure, like, you're here in the context of the church to represent Jesus as a part of his body.
Yeah.
And so if they don't see that clarity, then they're not going to do it. And mission drift is a huge piece of that.
Mm.
Another adage that I've always been, honestly, I go to it when I need some sanity, is that no one will ever do what you want them to do the way that you want them to do it, ever,
Mm.
ever.
Mm.
Like, um, it's amazing. I've tested this with like best friends, long-standing teammates. Um, it's ridiculous. And we've seen those illustrations of like, draw these things on someone's back and then they can't repeat it.
Oh yeah.
Or if they're
Uh-huh.
blindfolded and you're trying to describe, they don't do, you're like, no, 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 left, and they can't do it because they're interpreting what you're saying. They're running it through their filter. They're even valuing what you're saying. And maybe they think they know a little bit better. And maybe they do, but they'll just never do it the way that you want them to do it ever.
Mm.
And so, like, if that's going to be true, A, it gives us as leaders a little bit of sanity, but B, it means that we have to do that consistent, um, encouraging communication. How can we bring more clarity? Hey, man, saw you sitting there on Instagram. Totally get it. Lobby was empty. it'd be a great opportunity during that downtime is to blah, blah, blah. And like you bring in, this is what the expectation is, or this is what would be a great idea, or here's how I see you being a really valuable piece to the team. Um, and that always happens when we start to see that mission drift or that shifting away from I'm not doing what I was asked to do.
Mm. No, that's really good. I love that thought. Well, I'm frustrated by that thought of the no one will ever do what you want them to do the way that you want, however that line goes. And because it's right, you're true. It's uh and it's a perspective setter on
Mhm.
being patient, being humble, and continuing to communicate as clearly and consistently as possible. And I also appreciate how you're saying like look for the mission drift. Look for opportunities to speak in, not with a heavy hand, but as like a reminder of
No.
the why. Uh,
Yep.
and as we continue to talk about that why over and over again, hopefully that's going to provide clarity for our team members, for ourselves, as reminders to ourselves, because we also forget the why and the mission in our day-to-day just tasking, and to bring that to the forefront of our team members is so good. What are ways that a leader can effectively communicate and ensure a shared understanding of the mission, the values, the objectives within the team?
I think creative repetition is like massive. So again, if we assume that communication's already happened, they're never going to get it.
Mm.
It's just so hard to grab a hold of stuff. I mean, think about going to a movie that you've been excited about for months. You go see the movie, and then someone's like, "What is your favorite part?" And you're like, "I just saw it." Um, there was
Uh-huh.
that one line. I mean, like you just saw a thing you were super excited about, and recalling specifics is
Yep.
darn near impossible.
Yep.
And
Guilty.
so, if oh, I love movies. I'm so guilty of that. But like that creative repetition, it's not just. I add the word creative because it's not just drilling. Do you understand the three tenets of our values? Do you want, or in this case, do you understand the five reasons why leadership is so important, and walking through those factors? Like, how can you reinforce those things? People are audible learners, they're visual learners, they're kinetic learners. Like, are there unique and varied ways that you can help people understand this and pull those things in? And then I think one of the things that can be very overlooked is the relational connection to what we're
Mm.
trying to repeat. We have
Mm.
this saying around here that trust moves at the speed of relationship. And so the closer I am with
Mm.
you in relationship, the more and more I trust you. It's why we take bad advice from people that we love because we're relationally close and we trust them. And
Oof.
so the closer and closer we get to the people that we're trying to lead, like let them in, let them spend time with us, the more that they're going to actually share our mission and values because they feel closely connected to us. And that means the objectives are going to be shared. That means they want to do it because they want to, um, not in a people pleasing way, but I want to help my wife. I want to help my best friends. I want to help
Yeah.
my coworkers. I want to help my key volunteers. It is more motivation to, hey, I met this guy today at the store and he could really use my help. And you're like, gosh, I'm busy. I'm not really sure. Um, the farther out we get, the harder it is to buy into what they have to say. So pull them in, relationally do that. And now your repetition, they also want to hear what you have to say because they're more connected.
Yeah. 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 I I'm convinced that that line is true. Trust moves at the speed of relationships. I have seen
Yeah.
amazing examples of that, and I've seen some pretty bad ones.
Yeah.
And also the tell of are you trusting people that you're close with almost a little too much in the negative, if they maybe if there isn't as much competency on their end, or not the best track record, or whatever it could be. But there is something to say like, hey, just because you're close to them doesn't mean you should always listen to what they say. And I think people would say,
No.
well, yeah, that sounds like a no duh, but how often do we possibly do that with
No.
with people? And so, no, that's so good. How do you envision creating a space specifically for team members to troubleshoot and to collaborate specifically within their strengths? As we'll talk about maybe weaknesses and failure in a moment, but what about the strengths?
Yeah. So back to those relationships and moving it the trust forward. Do you know what they bring to the table? It's we say things like, how do you collaborate with people's strengths? Do you know what their strengths actually are?
Mm.
Um, And I don't mean like, did they fill out an assessment? I mean, those can always be helpful. I actually love different assessments,
Oh
but
yeah, totally.
how do they actually work in the team? Do they actually follow through with what they said? Are they great brainstormers? Like, are we willing to walk alongside them long enough to know the best thing that they bring to the table? Um, and then when I think about leadership, like I always want to set an environment where I'm not dragging people along. Like I
Mm,
want people to sprint beside me.
yeah.
And so I can't force what I think is the best solution onto people
Mm,
because that creates an environment of like, I have to listen to this guy. He's my boss. He's my pastor. He's my group leader. Like, fine. Like, all that is positional authority. Like, I don't even know that I want to rest for just relational authority. Like, oh, you like me. And like we were just saying, like, you trust me.
mm,
I want to lead in such a way that like you own it. You're
yeah.
excited about the process, you're excited about the goals, you're excited about what we're working on, you see your piece in it. And now when it's like, hey, Saturday's the gig, you're like, I can't wait to be there. They're beating me to the thing. Like that's the environment I want to set. But you can really only do that when you figure out their strengths. And so um, part of that for us as leaders is being willing to evaluate how fast we're going to make decisions.
Mm,
Sometimes we need to make expedient decisions, but more often buy-in is what's more important. And
yeah.
so if you need to slow a decision down because you need to get more and more people excited and buy into what's going on, that's going to serve us way, way better for the long haul than just trying to like make the decision because it's the right one right now.
Well, yeah, that buy-in piece is so huge because if you drum up the trying to drum up interest and no one's really getting interested with you, then it's going to be a little bit of an awkward event or meeting or whatever to be able to pull off. But if you can get the buy-in from your team members and they're all in and a little bit of that sharing of that like that cultivation of clarity, like it's clear to them and now they can go and cultivate that clarity amongst the people that maybe they lead or the guests that they get to interact with or the tasks that they get to pursue. And so that as you just said, like that is a vital thing with buy-in and sharing that cultivation of clarity. Do you have like any personal example of when you've maybe had a opportunity to do this and you've seen it kind of pan out in a good way?
We just are working on this initiative right now at our church where we're trying to help people. We've had a lot of new people in the last 2 years, like a lot. It's a weird turnover. I don't know if it's a post-COVID thing or what, but there's just a lot of folks that are still only coming, once every 6 to 8 weeks. They're kind of
Yeah.
checking things out.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I mean, it's a lot of folks. And so what we're realizing is a lot of the basic expectations or hopes of a follower of Christ are not necessarily instilled because a lot of these new folks, they're not churched either. And so they don't
Mm,
have that idea of what following Jesus should look like. So we're going into this whole season of what does it mean to like invest your life into other people? And we realized that there's this uh, lack of clarity as to what would happen if we went to our student ministries and said, hey, we're going to give you 25 new volunteers next week. Like I actually said that to one of our to our youth pastor, and he just looked at me like, I don't know for sure what I would do with 25 new volunteers in a week.
uh-huh.
And so we sat down and we had kind of worked through this grid, and that's for another day.
Hmm.
But like all of a sudden, that youth pastor was like, I actually could take 54 new volunteers right now if you had them for me.
Whoa.
All because he slowed down and realized this is what I actually could need and where they would actually be beneficial right now.
Hmm.
And then we did the same task with now, how are we going to bring people on board to that? And we realized that like we should not just do a weekend or two of, hey, everybody, you should volunteer. We're like, what if we can really slow this process down, get people to understand the vision, help them see the value that it brings to them personally in their faith journey, help them see how they are a value and can be a part of the whole team, and then show them the clear next steps of what's taking place. And we're like, you know what? Let's shift the season. We were actually going to do that in February or in March, coming up here in a couple of weeks, but we slowed it down. We're like, we're going to do that later into the spring and make the summer a season of onboarding and really help people move through that because we're like, we need the buy-in, even though some of our teams they're ready for new volunteers. Like we have to
Hmm.
do this the right way
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
otherwise we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot.
Yeah. No, that's a great example. And curiously, nerdily speaking, I would be so curious to, as a youth pastor, to see that, look at that plan of like how do you onboarding that many people that quickly, and what would you do with all them? Because that's yeah. I think you said so accurately to pause and to
Hmm.
stop and to assess. Because we're running so quickly as leaders, more quickly than we probably should be many times. Which is why moments of pause and break and strategy meetings and other things like that are so healthy and so needed as we continue to live in our context in our workspaces. But we get to work on the context and workspaces through those strategies and pauses and so on and so forth. What about this idea of uh, ownership and accountability? Ownership is
Hmm.
awesome. It's great. And accountability is not awesome. It can be. It should be, but it can be a difficult tension of how do I give ownership to my team members while also providing accountability. How do you
Yeah.
balance the tension in effectively maintaining both of them?
I'm always trying, and I want to emphasize that word try because everybody's a little bit different, but I'm always trying to like co-land on the goals of how we can achieve the vision together.
Mm,
And so the more that I can co-create, um, this is where we're headed, this is what we need to accomplish. If we can co-create the timelines, because sometimes I have it in my mind, especially when it comes to volunteers, like, man, if we could knock this out in a couple of weeks, that'd be great. And they'll look back at me and say, Joe, that's probably about 18 man hours. And in my schedule, I can't pull that off in 2 weeks. Like, is a month okay?
mm,
Actually, yes, I came up with 2 weeks arbitrarily. And so if we can come up with those timelines together, now they feel their own pressure. They added to why that timeline is what it is. And so when I come back around and say, hey, we're 2 weeks out, how's things going? Hey, we're a week out, like the only reason they're going to push back now is if they've been irresponsible, at which case that's what needs addressed versus like, I had these unspoken expectations. Why aren't you meeting them?
mm.
If we need things faster, then we need to actually explain it. Um,
Yeah.
I was that same volunteer push that we're talking about here at Grace. Um, one of the teammates pushed back and said, like, man, the spring is crazy for me. I have this initiative and this initiative. It happens every year. Like, that's the wrong time for me to look at onboarding a potential slew of volunteers.
Mm,
And then we walked them through like the journey, the teaching series, how we were doing all of this, why it was going to be this incredible season. And like, because we knew why we had made those decisions, by the end of that conversation, like, yeah, that is the right season. We'll
mm.
figure it out.
Yeah.
If you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, it's going to be really hard to lead them to and through what you're trying to get them to.
Yeah.
So teach them why you're deciding what you're deciding instead of the cliche, like, because I said so.
Ooh.
Um,
Hmm.
that it's a default because we've made the right decision, doggone it. Um, but if we can't explain it well, then we're not going to be able to lead very confidently.
Yeah. 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 No, I couldn't agree more with that. So, how do you believe that a team's unity and synergy are enhanced when the culture is carried out not just by the leader, but by every member of the team a little bit more, as what we've been trying to delve into here?
Yeah. So, um, some hard truth. Your culture is culture. So whatever your team is currently carrying, that is your actual culture. So
Mm,
if you think it needs change, that's absolutely fine and maybe even necessary. But don't lie to yourself that the ideals you wish your culture was like is your culture.
uh,
When we say things like we have a value here at our church that we have no spare parts. Like there's a place for everyone at the church, but if the people on our team, whether it's our staff or our volunteer leaders, aren't prioritizing meeting with people, helping people find their fit, walking them through to get connected, like those are just nice words.
hmm.
Um, it's not our culture. We fought this about 10 years ago where we want people to get involved. And I don't mean that in a let's build the organization. We're like, people thrive when they're connected to the mission and life of the church. And so, like, we want people to be connected with that. Well, about 10 years ago, we kept hearing over and over and over again, it's so hard to get connected at Grace. It's so hard to get plugged in. It's so hard to get involved. And we're like, no, like, our values are this. And they're like, it doesn't matter what you say your value is. The culture of your organization is, it's hard to get plugged in.
Yeah.
And so, um, one of the reasons that the team's unity and synergy are enhanced when it's carried by everybody is because that's the only way to actually create that culture. So take a hard look and an honest evaluation of how your team, how your group, whatever is operating, and be honest about where the culture is, because that will help you know how to get them to where it needs to be.
That's a tough pill to swallow when you have your ideals on paper or plastered on a wall, and in practicality, it's not really living out the way
Yeah.
that you would like. That's a humbling pill to swallow, but it's we can't you can't ignore it. It
Right.
could be easy to or desirable to, but you're really just putting a band-aid on the issue or just overtly ignoring it. So the need to address things head on, it's gonna take a lot of extra work. It's gonna call for some extra meetings, maybe some tears, even some heaviness, and yet the
Yep.
need to say, we got to get this right. The mission is too important. Our values are, we believe in these. Where is the disconnect? Where is the thing that's not following through the pipeline? And to have those honest conversations with you, with your higher ups, with your teammates, is so needed. It's the heavy lifting that really does separate good from great teams.
Yeah.
I think I would say. Now, another thing I think, and using that phrase, like good from to great,
Hmm.
is utilizing this idea of mistakes and
Yeah.
freedom to fail and so on and so forth. So when mistakes are made, because it's no surprise to say that they're going to, what's the balance of allowing mistakes and freedom to fail, while also maintaining a certain level of quality that just needs to be hit?
This is honestly a very good question, Tony, because some of our personalities, we want to fire on all cylinders at all times, and we want to be make great first impressions with people. We want there to be value in the work that we do, and all of those things are fantastic. But if we don't create an environment for failure, then what that communicates to the person that's maybe even feeling called by God to engage in the ministry or the mission with you, it's communicating that they might not be good enough.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know that I fit in what God is doing because the expectation of excellence is so high. I'm nervous to even start. Um, and so I can't remember the book off the top of my head, but there's this book that talks about how if there's a ship that's going to be attacked by a pirate ship, and the home ship, so to speak, has enough gunpowder to fire 10 bullets or two cannonballs, um, what are you going to do? Well, if you shoot one cannonball and it's 20 feet short, and you shoot the second cannonball and it's 10 feet short, you're dead in the water. It's over.
Hmm.
You have no more gunpowder to do it. So, what if you spent 5 bullets worth of gunpowder to figure out the wind trajectory, the distance, and all of that, and then you shot the cannonball? And so give people
Hmm.
a chance to shoot the small bullets before they are under pressure to shoot the cannonball. Let
Hmm.
them explore. Let them, like we do this with some of the young leaders that we're raising up as interns and residents. It's like lead the Bible study, preach at the small church down the road that's asking, like, do you have an intern that can cover a Sunday? Let the youth group, the Tuesday night Bible study get taught by that kid who's figuring things out. Like, find the right environments to test things before you put them in front of, 300 people with all the lights on in what feels like a no-fail zone. It's going to be broadcast online. And now they're like, I've never done this before, and I don't know what I'm
Hmm.
supposed to do. But that goes all the way down to like, can you handle the food for a group? If someone says, I would like to cook for a team, don't make them cook for the 300 person event. Let them
Yep.
cook for the small group. Let them cook for the worship team. Let them cook for this. Are they on time? Is it quality? Was it handled well? Was it the right amount of food? Like, what was their attitude in the process? And help them grow. It's the parable of the talents in real
Oh
life.
yeah,
You can be
absolutely is.
faithful in the small things. Now you can be faithful in the big things. And then we have to remember as leaders that like failure is actually great. Whether you want to pull in the familiar example of, inventing the light bulb, or just even how engineers work, not knowing how something works is fantastic because it zeroes in what does. And so allowing ourselves to know, okay, now we know that asking people to show up at 6 a.m. before church for a leadership meeting doesn't work.
Mm.
The other thing that kind of goes into that is you have to know where you're trying to take people. So, if you haven't picked up already, I'm a metaphor guy. I love thinking through things conceptually.
Yep, I'm a
Like
fan.
you're in Eastern PA, I'm in Northeast Ohio. If I hit the road to drive out to you and all along Interstate 76, there's a detour and it tells me, hey, you got to get off here. Well, if I know where I'm going, the detour is a little bit inconvenient. Now I have to relearn my route a little bit, but I know where I'm going. And so I'm just going to figure out the next route that works. If I don't know where I'm driving, then a detour is going to send me around driving aimlessly, or it's going to feel like no big deal. But in reality, I'm drifting away from effectiveness because I don't know what I'm even trying to accomplish in the first place.
Yeah.
And so there's a big difference in knowing that 6 a.m. leadership gathering. Two conclusions could be made if I don't know where I'm going. Well, 6 a.m. on a Sunday is probably a really hard sell. Or, gosh, maybe my leaders just don't want to gather. Maybe they don't want equipped. If I don't know where I'm trying to take people, both conclusions are equally as valid. Um, and so we have to be willing to kind of step into those awkward moments, know where we're going, understand what failed, and allow that to be something that we learn from moving forward.
And those are some profound insights to be able to provide around failure, where it takes two to tango. So there's a need to
Mhm.
for you to be identifying the clear markers of here's the path to move forward for an individual to set them up for success, while also it's the individual who's willing to pursue excellence and be willing to take that risk and being willing to try something new. And as you said, providing them smaller spaces to I mean, not necessarily prove themselves, but kind of in a way that
Yeah.
as they get responsibility in their hands, and then they show that man they can handle this well, and we keep providing them more and more. Like I said, we're not providing a meal for 300 people the very first time you're putting someone in charge of a meal. You're doing it for a smaller gathering,
Yeah.
and so I think that yeah, those are some really helpful insights as we think about
And
failure in this conversation.
yeah, and we need to create a culture of owning it. Like,
Yeah.
to get into some of the nitty-gritty pieces of the scriptures, like we're supposed to confess our sins, we're supposed to bring things into the light. If we pretend like we're perfect all the time, then we're also communicating that you have to be perfect all the time. And
Yeah.
so when I mess up the detail and I mess up the thing I was supposed to say, or I forget to bring that one person or get that one deadline, like I need to own that. And it's okay. Like we're not going to be perfect. The church, our ministries, our mission for Jesus is supposed to look a lot more like a family than it is a Fortune 500 company, even if the family is really efficient and effective in what they do.
Yep.
Like we have to cultivate those relationships together.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more for sure. So I've been told this line that I really have drawn towards, which is clear is kind in
Mm,
cultivating clarity. How would you personally interpret this line, and how can leaders ensure that clarity is communicated in a kind and respectful way while it's also direct and
yeah.
honest? How do you balance that?
Yeah, the clarity is kind. I think back to that life group leader that I was telling you about that didn't know what was expected of them going into it. Like they felt bamboozled, and we don't want that. We want the kindness. I don't think a doctor ever feels upset that they have to go to so much schooling. And part of that's because they're told way up front, you're going to be in school for a long time before this ever plays out.
Mm,
Um, and then tone is like everything. Now, maybe that's
yeah.
just a personal conviction. I don't know if you can tell or not on screen, but like I'm not a small guy. I'm 6'2". I'm about 280 pounds. I used to play football. I like to work out. So like, while I'm certainly not like Jack Reacher or anything, like I'm not an unopposing figure when it comes to certain people.
Mm,
And so I've learned that about myself, especially when I'm thinking or if I get a little bit frustrated, like my face countenance can really change. I can start to look angry even when I'm not. Like I have
mm,
my resting thinking face is not that kind. And so I've had to like learn that too. Um, but like I even at times, this might sound disingenuous. I like to say it's like First Corinthians 9 when Paul says, be all things to all men and women. Um, my default register can actually get pretty low. And so if I'm angry or trying to communicate clarity, or if I'm a little bit frustrated what's going on, like now suddenly I sound a lot more upset or
Mm,
intimidating versus like if I'm talking up here and I'm just like, well, I'm not really sure. Like even just that slight vocal tone can
yeah,
help people feel a little bit more at ease, even if my words are almost exactly the same.
absolutely.
Um, the other thing that I think is incredibly important is like, are we willing to think about what they're going through situationally? So, situational leadership has been one of my go-to tools for a long, long time. And the short description of how this works is we're looking at two factors into how they're operating. One, what's their personal, mental, spiritual health and identity? Like, as a believer in Christ, are they confident in who they are in the Lord? Or do they have some spiritual maturity? Those kind of things. The other axis would be, do they know what they're doing? Do they know when to show up, how to execute the task at hand? Because they're very different things. I can be a phenomenally mature believer in the Lord, but if I've never run a small group, I just don't know how to do it yet.
Yep.
And vice versa. I've run small focus groups for work all the time, but I'm a brand new believer. Are you sure that I could do this? They're different things. And so situational leadership would say, like, if you're low in both, you have to supervise those people. I need to help instill who you are and help you know what to do at the same time. So I want to be a little bit more hands-on with you. If you know what to do, but you don't know who you are in Christ, like I'm going to mentor you. I want to like build you up, remind you of who you are, help you grab a hold of your identity. If you know who you are, but you don't know what you're doing, I need to coach you and I need to treat you as such. I'm not downplaying you. I'm not vilifying you as an individual. I'm trying to help you almost like a coach would a quarterback. Like, hey, next time you see this formation out there, this is the act. Oh, that's right. That makes a lot of sense. Like you're coaching them on the skills. And then if in that scenario, they know confidently who they are and they know what to do, then you need to treat them as someone you're delegating to. Like you're a teammate in this situation, you're a teammate in this scenario. I'm not going to over clarify. I'm not going to over encourage because you're becoming more and more of a peer in this scenario, and I don't want to micromanage. When we can kind of like see people relationally where they're at, it can help change our tone because now we're an encourager, or now we can encourage as we step into a season of coaching or however those situations play out. But the tone, making sure we're seeing them for who they are and where they're actually at, like that really helps us be clear and kind at the same time.
Yeah, no, that's so good. I think that it's wild exactly what you spoke towards that you can say something same exact words, but your tone changes the whole way it's
Oh,
received 100%,
yeah,
which is why we say that your approach is just as important if not more than the words that you say. And in
absolutely.
leadership, how many times, I mean, I can think of off the cuff 5 times easily where I have said something and it just didn't land the way I intended because of the way that my face was, my words were,
Mhm.
my tone, my body posture, and I've had to circle back and just say, hey, was that interpreted differently than the way that I hoped it would? And so to have that, even that humbling posture to say, like, circling back to team members or people or bosses or whatever, when you possibly didn't, the intent wasn't necessarily the impact of your words, if you will.
Yeah, yep,
So no, that's huge, and clarity is in clear is kind. Now, what about the word inconsistency?
yeah.
Consistency, we would say, is a key towards this cultivation of clarity. So, why is inconsistency a detrimental trait to the individual who's trying to cultivate clarity?
Yeah, inconsistency is terrible because people start to feel undermined and undervalued. So if I
Mhm.
ask someone to go work on a project and move towards this goal, and then the very next meeting, we're not doing that goal or that project, they're starting to feel like, well, why am I even here? Why
Mm.
would you have me work on that in the first place? And it's going to affect the next assignment. And so, hey, would you help me run down this data? Would you help me figure this out? Would you plan this event? Oh, we're not pulling that off anyway. Yeah, we're not going to do that. Like, they're going to give a half amount of effort to the next thing that you ask them to do because they don't trust that you actually are going to follow through.
Mm.
And so the way that we fight against that is we have to make things visual, whether it's the goals and or the progress. And I would say like we have to, even if it's not your specific skill set. So if it's not your skill set, find someone whose it is. It's an assistant, it's a teammate. They're willing to help make that clear. Like we love metaphors, like we should be on the same page. That one should not be a metaphor. There should be something that we go back to and say, this is what we're working toward.
Mm.
This is the plan. This is the date. And that way, if we have to change it, now you're making a definitive decision. Kind of back to some of the things we talked about earlier, you're explaining why, like what changed. If you go back to March of 2020, I was going to preach on whatever that weekend was where the world got shut down.
Oh, wow.
And at the time, I was still like just, and I mean that in the appropriate way, but I was just like the global missions, a local mobilization pastor. And so when the world shut down, we pivoted and we're like, maybe our senior pastor should take this weekend and like address us all as the world is like trying to figure out what the heck is going on.
Yeah.
Well, if he would have just said, now hopefully with what was happening, I would have picked it up. But if he would have said, hey, I'm changing the preaching schedule, I'm going to preach instead, I'm probably like, what, do you not trust me? Like,
Mm.
what gives? What's wrong? Like, why would you
Yeah.
do that? But because he was able to say, here's what's changed, here's how the scenario has reinformed what we're trying to accomplish, and here's why I'm probably the best foot forward in this scenario. Oh, that makes all the sense in the world, man, because we're gonna have to change. We're gonna have to pivot. And that's fine. But if
Yeah.
it's on a whim or it's because you forgot what you said in the last meeting, that kind of stuff's not acceptable.
Yeah. Well, it's easy. Yeah, to say that we need to stay consistent is one thing. To actually live it out as a vital practice, a consistency is another
Yeah.
thing. And to almost stir the pot maybe a little bit with this question, because you kind of fed into it, even just saying that scenario of the COVID sermon. There is a need at times to break from consistency. Like you were preparing and it got pivoted and it shifted. So like what's the difference between inconsistency and discerning the need just to pivot from an established plan or vision or task? And how do you combat the possible criticism when someone would say, "Oh, you're just being inconsistent then?" Like how do you address that?
Yeah. So I think we should be willing to constantly evaluate. Like it's okay to get that feedback. It's okay to allow yourself to wonder if you've made the right decision. But I would slow down your revisions. Just because you had a week that went bad, or a meeting that didn't go the way that you planned, or the ministry that you just started, or your small group is not getting off to the right foot, does not mean you need to blow everything up right away. Like give something a real chance. We have shifted things before from like a Sunday to a Wednesday night experience, and in the month or two or whatever the season was that we're communicating that, like families like you're messing with my whole schedule and this is never going to work. And you have some volunteers that had to quit because they work on that day, and so
Yeah.
like you start getting all of this feedback. And if we're going to revise every time we evaluate, now we're being blown and forth back on the wind and the waves, and that's just not healthy for anybody. So we have to give it a real shot. And then we have to be able to learn. And I mean, like, really learn what it is that we're trying to do. So if we're evaluating what is the consistency, like, truly, we're no longer connecting with people in the community since we moved this program to a different day. The only people coming are those that have already been connected to our ministry.
Hmm.
I shifted my preaching style because I read this book and now I want to preach this way. Or I saw this TikTok and now I'm going to start doing my small groups in this fashion. Like, and you can be really convicted about it, but then you do it 5, 6, 7 times and like people are not responding. Like, learn why that's not working and then readjust. And back to the ownership, like be willing to say, we gave something a shot. We were shooting a couple of bullets to try to see where these things would land, and it didn't work. And that's
Hmm.
okay. But here's what we learned. I work with a local ministry here that interacts with women that are victims of sex trafficking.
Mm.
And for about 7 years, they had a safe house for adult women who needed a safe place to land as they were kind of getting out of that lifestyle or out of those trapped scenarios. And the short version is after 7 years, they shut the safe house down
Mm.
because they learned more effective ways to do the exact same ministry, but in much better, much more effective means. And so they were able to articulate, here's what we learned with this experiment. Now we're shifting. And people are like, we invested into that house. We thought this was the thing. When you read these articles, and they're like, listen, and they were able to kind of actually articulate, we're not making a whim decision. This isn't a budget decision. This is something that we're actually seeing taking place. The transformation we're seeing happen in the women. This is why we need to shift from our previous MO. And so like, if we're not willing to learn, then we're going to get caught in the crosshairs of people's criticisms, and we're not going to know how to respond to it because we didn't learn why we need to change.
Mm.
And then the last thing I want to just kind of encourage is do not let boredom be the reason that you're changing things.
Mm.
Um, some of us as leaders, we're naturally innovators. And usually, if that's your natural bent, you're really bad at helping, like letting a plan like go to full fruition. You're much better at like casting the vision, getting people excited, and not working on Thursdays toward the goal to make sure that the deadlines are met.
Mm.
And so if you're just like, we need to change things, make sure it's not just because you're bored. Like maybe you need something else to work on, but don't just adjust everything because you need to resink your teeth into a project.
Man, Joe, this is so good. You're providing so much insights and thoughts behind some of this change concepts. And honestly, I don't know if you realize this, but episode 13 of the Develop Leadership podcast, we had Keith Manier on,
Mm.
and he specifically talked about leading through change and disruption.
Oh, great.
And so for our listeners who maybe would know Keith, episode 13, go back and check that one out. I think it could be a really good episode to really complement what you're talking about within this idea of change, because it's so needed, so healthy, but it's a delicate balance and tension in leading through the discerning between inconsistencies and pivoting and so on and so forth. And we've covered a ton of ground. We have talked a lot, ins and outs, highs and lows, beauty and tension as we land the plane of the conversation. Would you have any other leadership hacks, tips, wisdom, advice, caution, maybe that you would provide to our listeners as we end our time?
Nothing necessarily comes to mind outside of like when you find a resource that feels like matches the way that you think, the way that you operate, like don't be afraid to like run that full. So like for instance, two resources that have been very, very helpful to me lately. One is The Six Working Geniuses by Patrick Lencioni.
It's so good. Yep.
It's so good. And it's there's lots of different personality and working relationship things out there, and they're also good. I think layering those things can be really wise, but there's clarity to The Six Working Geniuses that's a little bit easier to understand. Like let that run its course, like run it through. Don't let it just be a staff meeting or a team meeting or an idea. The real value, the real effectiveness in that stuff is to run it all the way through. And then another one was a book called Church Unique by Will Mancini. And I want to encourage, if you're listening to this and you're not in pastoral ministry, do not let the title Church Unique scare you from engaging this concept, because there's so much in here about you individually have a very unique ministry. No one has ever been called to the community that you're called to. No one has ever had your unique DNA and makeup and mindset, and you've never been a part of your current ministry in those three factors before. So what's your sweet spot? What do you bring to the table as you're a part of this mission, as you're trying to reach these people? And then how do you actually work that through and learn how to carry that from I have an idea or I have a calling to like now I actually know how to push things and make them kind of move in the direction of what I think my calling is. So it's a phenomenal resource as well. And it's been incredibly helpful for me in these last years.
I would also give a testimony towards the Working Geniuses. Our staff has recently worked through that as well and has been very illuminating, very insightful, and very grateful for Patrick Lencioni's resource of the Working Genius. And then the book, Church Unique, I haven't read that one. So thank you for giving that
That's
one to
fun.
me personally. And I am probably I'm gonna check it out. So thank you for both those resources. And just one big thank you for the insights that you provided. This topic is, again, as we said, it's vital, it's crucial. It's tense. But it really does allow a team to thrive when we are intentionally cultivating clarity, not within ourselves, but within our teammates, and providing them to be empowered in that way. So, man, just thank you so much for the way that you provide these insights and expertise in it. And though you would never say you're perfect in it, far from it, if you will, but yet you are willing to intentionally put the work into it in your own space and through this conversation. So just very, very thank you so much for being willing to come on today and talk about this.
Absolutely, Tony. Thanks for having me. It's been fun to process this stuff with you, and I hope that for both sides of our multi-state pond, it provides a lot of fruit. So we'll see what happens.
I pray so as well. Well, if you are liking what you're hearing and what you're listening to, would you be willing to hit the share button wherever you consume the content? We hope that you will join us next time as we continue to explore the art and science of building your developing leadership capacity. Catch you next time.